Good morning once again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your comfort break, as Nigel had put it. We are about to start the first roundtable discussion of this morning's activities, a discussion entitled Transformation in Public, Evolving Public Policy Practices and Trends in the Caribbean. And of course, this comes at the foot of what would have been a very thoughtful and instructive keynote presentation that was delivered by Bevel Wooding on investing in transformation. Some of the takeaways from that keynote that I think are useful to highlight in this is that we really need to take stock of what is happening. And that's the reason why we have these round panels, so that we speak directly or we hear from the people who are in the trenches in terms of various digital transformation initiatives, and we get an appreciation for the considerations that they needed to take into account and the lessons learned from the initiatives. We also had quite a riveting discussion about the involvement of youth in digital transformation, not only as ambassadors and them becoming aware, but having their voices really come to the fore. And Bevel also mentioned a very key issue here, the question of policy context. I like to refer to a term that was coined by someone quite familiar to me, Dr. Kieran Swift, policy creolization. The idea that we cannot just transplant foreign or global concepts without taking into consideration some of the indigenous steps that are needed to actually come up with appropriate policy solutions for us, for our reality. So with me for this roundtable discussion, we have a number of very esteemed speakers. The idea would be that each speaker would be able to present on his or her initiative, and at any point in time, you, the audience, are free to submit your questions or comments via the Q&A in the Zoom toolbar, and I'll try to feed that into the discussion and have it be as lively as a discussion as we could have. So we have with us this morning Dr. Curtis Charles, who is the Director of Academic Affairs at the UE 5 Island campus. We also have with us Ms. Ophelia Blanchard from the Government of St. Kitts and Nevis, who is going to be talking about a digital services IXP development in St. Kitts and Nevis. Dr. Charles is going to talk about capacity building. And last but not least, Ms. Denise White, from the government of Trinidad and Tobago, looking at measuring digital transformation. So a wonderful good morning to these three speakers. Of course, as mentioned, we'll be fielding and including comments and questions into the discussion, but I would like for us to start now with Dr. Curtis Charles, who will be addressing the issue of building innovation capacity within the Caribbean.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. I was glad I was able to participate in the first session. A lot of nuggets that Bevel mentioned there. The smallness is one of the things that we talk about a lot. I'm not sure if I could share my screen, but if I can, there are a couple of slides I wanted to pop up. But the smallness is something that is really near and dear to our heart. As you know, I'm with the University of West Indies 5 Island campus, and the campus is less than 3 years old. And the size of our campus is, by the end of this semester, in the beginning of this fall semester, beginning of September, would be approximately about close to 1,000 students in less than 3 years. And that just gives you an idea of the purpose for our campus. We put a couple of things in context when we talk about our campus. If you look at the OECS, only 20% of the population has tertiary education and above. Only in Antigua and Barbuda, only 10% of the citizens have a college degree. No region, no island can compete with such numbers. So one of the things that we wanted to do is that we wanted to take a look at what was our agenda first for this campus, and how do we differentiate ourselves among the other campuses, but how do we build capacity? So we ask ourselves a couple of things. I'm a data scientist, so I always look at the numbers, trying not to make emotional decisions. So we look at some statistics from MIT, from Microsoft Research. And when we look at some of the statistics, 47% of current jobs are expected to be taken over by machines during the next 2 decades. As educators, we just can't ignore those data sets. So you shouldn't be in a profession teaching students for the future of work if you know that 47% of those jobs are going to be taken over by machines. One of the things that I like is also only 33% of the world's demands for employees for technology skills are being met. I put on my entrepreneurship hat and I say, you know what, that's some great numbers that I think the university should be really involved in. So we look at really when we try to figure out what's the campus should be all about. We really try to be guided by the numbers. We try to be guided by research. We look at the future of work by the World Economic Forum and look at what are the decreasing jobs and what are the increasing jobs. Increasing jobs from number 1 to 10, you have data analysts and scientists, AI.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Charles. Are you still on? Or is the problem on my end? Could anyone just indicate?
I can hear you, Kevon.
Okay. All right, so I think there's probably just a slight problem on his end.
Turning knowledge into action to
All right, excuse Dr. Charles, you were blocked out for just about 30 seconds. Do you mind just doing a quick recap? Right after you were speaking about the needs to develop the campus.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened there, but let's go. So one of the things we're looking at is we try to frame our discussion in how do we transform lives on the campus? How do we turn knowledge into action to confront some of the wicked challenges of the region and the globe? And how do we revolutionize and exponentially increase interdisciplinary degrees? So one of the things we looked at is what is the one mechanism could do that? So when I arrived 22 months ago, the campus was just about 1 year, had basically embraced most of Kevon's programs. And I didn't think that we should be a small Kevon. So we had the School of Business and Management, we had the School of Health and Behavioral Sciences, and we had the School of Humanities and Education. And one of the things we wanted to do was to have this catalytic element on campus. What is the catalytic element we could have had on campus that is going to change all that? So I was very interested to hear the word creolization, because that's a word I use a lot when I talk about science, computing, and artificial intelligence. So we wanted to think about how do we start reimagining the creolization of science, technology, artificial intelligence as a catalyst to build innovative capacity on campus. So the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence was birthed, and we got that approved from the university system. It's the only university of its kind, only school of its kind within the university campus. And Five Island is also the only campus of its kind. As you know, UE is built of faculties. We are built of schools. So we are a little bit more aligned somewhere in between the American system and the UE system. But we have schools, but we still have a principal rather than a president. So when we look at the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence, we really wanted a school that would be able to bring students who are in business, who could come to the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence and study business analytics. Or if you're in health and behavioral sciences, you could come and study health informatics. Or if you're in education, you could come and study AI and data and do precision education. Precision education where you could really use sentiment analysis to customize the type of learning for each student. And if you could customize the learning for each student, you could customize the learning for every student in your classroom and hence every student on campus. So when we talk about the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence, we're looking, initially when I was asked to think about a school and design it, I really was looking at a multi-sided platform. I really wasn't looking at a face-to-face environment. So if you look at the image if you see the image of the school, it's built of nodes and connections. And the idea was, it doesn't really matter what school you're in. This is an area where, if you could imagine a wide auditorium of different majors collaborating together on ideas. So you may have a student in computer science collaborating with someone in health informatics, trying to solve problems for disaster risk management. So it's the emergence of what happens in the connection and the emergence is what really important to the school. So in terms of Five Island campus, we really wanted to say, okay, so we have the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence. We have the other three schools. What do we need to bring together? So we spent probably about a year to develop the interdisciplinary BSc in Data Science, Innovation Management, and Computer Science. And it's a program. My understanding, it's the first interdisciplinary program in UA's history. I was challenged on that recently, but I stand by that until I could be proven differently. Because UA is accustomed having majors and minors and specialties and double majors. This was designed to develop a new type of student. So in this degree, there are 4 domain areas that students study: economics, data science, innovation management, and computer science. And if you could imagine this as weaving a basket, if a government is trying to figure out how much money do they put aside for projected expenses next year, they had to gather data based on the past year trends. Well, that's data science, and they need to understand the patterns and trends of how money was spent. So that's computer science, where you run algorithms. And then you need to projectize that or productize that. And that's where the innovation management comes in. So the idea is that these 4 different disciplines are molded in such a way where we graduate a student, rather than having a student in the trenches, we have a student who could come in at mid-management and help a government, help a company, or take their company public, which is really the focus of where I want to leave this. We really have the notion that this is an entrepreneurship institution. When I was asked in my interview, why would I want to leave the US after living there so long to return to the Caribbean? And I have one answer. I believe that Five Island campus, where it is positioned right now in Antigua and Barbuda and the OECS region, has the potential to develop the Silicon Islands of the Caribbean. And I stand correct. I will stay with that until I probably leave the institution, but I hope it happens because we have all the ingredients. We have a group of young students who doesn't care about hierarchy. All they want to do is to innovate. They want us to take all the barriers away from them. We now have a world-renowned institution in the OECS region, which wasn't there before. We have companies and we have governments. I think we have all the ingredients, and I am very proud of the fact that I could lead this academic initiative from an innovative perspective. And I would want to leave you with this one thing. And Bevel talked about smallness, and smallness is not something that bothers me. I'm a trained architect as well. And every architecture design starts with a little idea, right? And then you see a skyscraper. But the example that really moves me is my alma mater. Look, in 1666, Harvard was the first university in the United States. 225 years later, MIT popped up right down the street. They called us a community college. They tried to buy MIT several times. MIT right now is and has been the #1 engineering school for decades upon decades. I am moved by the fact that this was a small institution that started with a chemistry major, serving Civil War veterans on a land-grant institution, having funding from the government, and has blossomed into probably the #1 science and technology institution. That's what drives me about Five Island campus. And I think that we have all the ingredients and the potential to become that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Charles. I'm just going to speak quickly to a comment by Mr. Stephen Abiraj, who is speaking about a similarity with 2 programs at UA St. Augustine, the BSc in Computer Science. And he said prior to 1984 is referred to as the FAGS option 55. I truly appreciated the comments you made with the 4 disciplines that are combined here, the question of economics with data science, innovation management, and computer science. And I understand that I can very much appreciate how that has a direct impact on the workplace. And I think that point that you made, being able to have that impact in the workplace and come in, these students trained in these 4 disciplines and also having collaborations with other majors, then being able to come in at a mid-management point and have an impact from there, I think that's very useful. And it's good to hear about the origins of that within the OECS space. So we are going to move on to our next speaker, Ms. Ophelia Blanchard. who is going to give us a short presentation on preparing for digital services, the IXP experience in St. Kitts and Nevis.
No, she's not. She's going to be presenting on another digital transformation initiative in St. Kitts.
Oh, yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. If I'm not mistaken, that's the Immigration and Customs.
I believe so.
Correct. Okay, Ophelia, the floor is yours, and great to have you with us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
You are.
Okay, thank you very much. So as Mr. Bevel would have spoken about, as it relates to what I'll be presenting briefly, I just wanted to give you a little perspective. I'm the e-government coordinator in the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. And currently I am working on the COVID-19 task force. And so my role is somewhat expanded, but specifically, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of our experience in terms of the implementation of border control management system, enhancing what we currently have. So around the world, we would have been impacted by COVID-19. And so countries are really preparing in terms of strengthening their borders, health, and security as well. And one of the things that we did was to look at how can we, within government, look at augmenting the current solution, the border management solution, and extending that to have a digital front. So a number of countries were engaging and having their forms being established where persons who are entering the Federation would have to complete the form and get approval through, let's say, national security immigration in order to be accepted in terms of entry into the country. What we would have done was to work with the stakeholders, and through that, we were able to come up with a localized solution. So in-house developers from the IT department led by myself, and we would have worked with the agencies and created that platform. So out of that, we are seeing the use of digital technologies, digital services. We are seeing how we were able to utilize localized skills, digital skills and software development to be able to build out on an existing border management solution. And we are still using that solution. It's the WWKNA travel form that can. And when persons log on, they were basically completing what we have as the Immigration and Customs form, where persons would have normally before COVID, they would have completed that form by hand. Now they're doing it online. So as it is, you still have to complete the form and you still have to submit a negative COVID-19 test result, RT-PCR test, and also if it's an antigen test within 1 day of arrival, then you have to complete and submit your vaccination card if you're non-national. What we would see is that beyond COVID, when we get to that stage, then there will be a transition. However, we would still be using that digital platform of capturing information, because not only is it being used in terms of COVID, but it actually assists in terms of border management, surveillance, intelligence. So what we are seeing is that as part of our overall thrust to become a digital economy, we are currently building out different strategies. We have strategy for economic recovery beyond COVID, and also looking at a subset of that, our cybersecurity strategy. We looked at having an innovation strategy, looking at our people, looking at the processes and technology. So COVID has somewhat fast track our digital transformation thrust. And we will continue building out our digital platforms throughout government so that we can have that more seamless service delivery. And our focus really is going to be building a lot on our people, where we can establish a digital culture within government, and piggybacking on what gains we would have made in getting persons to use digital systems during the past 2 years, we will be able to extend that and have more capacity building within the private sector and some collaboration as we look to develop a digital academy whereby we can work with public and private sector. So for our digital thrust, we recognize the importance of the security, the infrastructure. In terms of the IXP, just to touch briefly on that, the Internet Exchange Point is also a part of our strengthening of the infrastructure and keeping our content as much as possible localized, and to build on content creation and innovation. Our focused areas in terms of industry for moving forward with the economy are mainly ICTs, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing. So there will certainly be an opportunity whereby those sectors will be strengthened, and ICTs is going to be a central component of those. So I'll pause for now.
All right.
Thank you
so very much, Ophelia, for that expose, and in particular going into the details of that border management system. I wanted to use my prerogative here to just ask a few more questions on that front. One being, were there any silos from a public sector standpoint, because we're talking about immigration, airport management, public health. So were there any silos that have been overcome that, of course, would have been accelerated somewhat because of the context of the pandemic? And then the other question I have is in terms of the preparedness of your policy environment. We're looking at what would be security and data governance issues. Could you just give us a general comment on that? Because of course, these would be some of the long-lasting benefits, I would say, to having implemented this system. Hello. Good morning.
Hello. Hi. Sorry about that. Yes. So in terms of the issue of siloed, one of the things that we have is that we are working with the NEOC, which is the National Emergency Operations Center, under the umbrella of NEMA, our National Emergency Management Agency. So with that structure, that governance structure, it composed of a multi-sectoral approach, whereby you have not only public sector being represented, but also members of the private sector, for example, the chamber. So in the disaster management construct governance, we were able to utilize that same structure and reach all the stakeholders. So we're able to do as a multi-stakeholder approach. The only hurdle I think we encountered was really getting persons to embrace the technology, because it wasn't that easy just getting them on board and transitioning from the current processes into more digitized processes. However, once we were able to do that through some initial training, we were able to get them on board, and we see that we have a sustainable approach going forward. The next part of your question, as it relates to policy.
Yes, the enabling framework, as we often use that term, were there any considerations for what would have been data security, data protection, processing, the whole scheme of data governance issues in bringing forward this very prominent digital solution?
Yes. Yes, one of the things which we did, we were looking at the digital transformation strategy, which was established in 2019. And building on that, there would have been some legislation put forward which relates to data protection. And we would have started some work with the ITU in terms of cybersecurity. We would have done some work with the OAS as well. And so there were some initial engagements as it relates to security, governance, policy around protection, data protection. However, I think that just this experience has heightened the importance of really solidifying the legislative framework, the policy, and the governance. So I think now we are able to expedite it because the head of the Mitigation Council, who more or less oversee the whole COVID drive, is the Attorney General. So we are quite privileged that he understands the need to have these frameworks in place. And so through his office, we will be able to get expediting some of these areas.
Okay, thank you so much, Ophelia. And I like that you actually shared with us that whole issue of leadership here, the Attorney General being understanding of the considerations and being able to actually effect the changes that were needed. And as I was saying, this isn't just for the pandemic. This is something that will be long lasting in transformation. I think that's what we all need to keep in focus. When we talk about going back to normal, what exactly is normal? Does that mean going back to March 2020, or does that mean taking the best parts of what we have experienced over the 2 years and building on that as we go back to moving about more and those other aspects of what will be the end game for the pandemic? So thank you so much, Ophelia, and of course stay online because we're going to continue having questions and comments coming in. As a matter of fact, feel free to drop your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A and we'll filter them into the conversation. But next we're going to hear from Ms. Denise White, who is going to be talking about measuring digital transformation in Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, Denise. The floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, Kevon. Good morning, participants. And really grateful for this opportunity to talk about where we are in terms of measuring digital transformation, especially from the public policy perspective in Trinidad. You know, when we talk a lot about digital transformation, but, you know, how do we actually define what it is? And more importantly, how do we know that digital transformation is actually making a difference? So when we think about public policy implications, where we are right now in terms of defining, and I would call it a deliberate digital transformation strategy, we have to look at these measures when we decide what initiatives we're going to take up, what is going to be put in place, and how these initiatives are actually going to have that meaningful impact on the country, you know, on the citizens, and on their being able to interact in the virtual space, you know, with this intersection of technology and people. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we've had ICT plans for a long time. We've had the first ICT plan in 2003. It was branded Fast Forward, and it was a very aggressive connectivity agenda. So it looked at improving the state of infrastructure and making sure that that infrastructure was rolled out and available to all the citizens, the business community, etc., on the island. We are now looking at the evolution in the landscape, and we realize that we've had to take a more mature approach to how we're defining where we want to go in digital transformation. So the government has 3 strategic pillars. It's been divided up into digital economy, digital society, and digital government. And when we talk, so we bring in the conversation back to measurement. And so far, what we've seen is that measurement lives in this space that looks at infrastructure, it looks at skills, it looks at usage. But how are we extending the conversation into the area of impact, right? How do we know that by giving someone access, that it has made a meaningful difference in their lives? So the policy foundations of what we look at and these strategic measures still now correlate to these three pillars. So in terms of the digital economy, we look at it from an economic lens. So how is it contributing to national growth? How is it contributing to growth of the GDP, looking at measures of efficiency? When we look at it from a social point of view, we're looking at things like inclusion, so digital inclusion, financial inclusion. Do people actually have the opportunities for meaningful participation in this space? And then from the political lens of the policy, we're looking at that concept of public value. So is it that all citizens are being or have the opportunity to access the services? And are those services actually value for money? So in terms of citizen satisfaction with the services, because, and Kevon, you alluded to when we go back to normal, what is this normal? And should we not be taking advantage of what has happened in the global space, in our regional space over the past 2 years to accelerate that digital transformation and take the best of what was brought forward by this pandemic and make it a permanent inclusion into the people's lives. So in terms of this deliberate digital transformation strategy, you know, one of the things that we look at is how do we create what I'm referring to as a digital transformation index, right? Looking at policy measures. Are they useful? Are they usable? All right. In terms of being specific to the region, because we tend to adopt, but do we really adapt? So yes, it's good to look at what's going on in the international space, but are they really what we need as a region? And when we extend this conversation now to measurement, are we measuring what we need to as a region, right? Are we pegging ourselves against players that may not have the same cultural issues that we do, that may not have the same environmental issues that we do? So how do we put this into our regional space? And we also need to have a conversation about maturity, you know, looking at digital government initiatives. And I heard the last speaker talk about, you know, having all of these components put together to make a system work, all right? So we know we want, as government, seamless end-to-end services. But if the siloed institutions are not at all the same maturity levels, then how do we get a seamless system taking into account that they may be at different spaces of development? So how do we assess by maturity to make sure that that transformation can happen from one institution to another? And by developing this digital transformation index, what we hope to be able to do is to prioritize DT implementation strategies. So we know we are limited in terms of time. We know we are limited in terms of resources. We know we're limited, and when I say resources, I'm talking fiscal resources. We know we're limited in terms of people and skills. All right. So how do we then pick the projects that will be able to have the most meaningful impact? Because in designing a DT strategy, you know, you can really shoot for the moon and come up with all different kinds of initiatives that you say, oh, we should implement this or we should go after this. But don't try to boil the ocean. So how do you then whittle down which are the ones that should be picked for meaningful impact? So I guess what I want to really stimulate the discussion is, what do we need to measure, right? How do we measure this impact? Is it by the number of people who have access? Is it by the number of people who can afford to have access? Is it by the ability or the sophistication of the digital skills in the society? And how sophisticated do those skills need to be? And then how do we accurately capture the dimensions that need to be part of what we are measuring in terms of digital transformation? So that, as I said, is where I would like to start this discussion in terms of how do we measure digital transformation and make sure that it's meaningful and applicable to not just Trinidad and Tobago, but by extension, the region.
All right. Thank you very much, Denise, for talking about the measurement of digital transformation and giving us those very clear pillars as to what we should be looking at, not only within Trinidad and Tobago, but across the Caribbean when we talk about really seeing returns on digital transformation. At this point in time, I would like for anyone to please submit any questions or comments that you may have for Denise, Ophelia, or Dr. Charles. While we are waiting on those things, I wanted to put a question to you, Denise. Bevel had mentioned earlier the issue of the availability of resources, and he clarified that it's not a question of a blanket or a binary issue as to whether resources are there or not. He spoke about savings, and I want to throw in there possible dividends from digital transformation that actually could be reinvested into the sector. Has that been something that you had been looking at, or do you have any advice or practices you could share with us on that same question of those savings coming back into digital transformation?
Well, when we look at measures, a lot of times the measures look at what I call the demand side. So how do they affect the people? But we also have to look at the supply side of the measures. And I think that is where we start to talk about that question of efficiency gains. So if I am able to measure how transformation has affected my business, even as a small business person, you know, it starts to bring some questions as to, do I understand the components of what goes into making my business a business? You know, one of the projects that we have on the table right now is a development hub for developers. So specifically targeting small developers and bringing them into an environment where they're not only given the opportunity to see an idea through to its completion and bring it into the marketplace by commoditizing it, but they also have to understand the entrepreneurship side of it. So, you know, in terms of my business, how do I know that I am being efficient in my business? And if I was to sell this app or this solution to someone in the market, how can I show them what the efficiency gains of their business could be? So it's looking at it from the supply side, I would like to say, and understanding, firstly, what are the components that go into the solutions that are developed, and how then are we able to measure efficiencies and to show where, if, you know, we take this digital transformation to its logical end, it can bring about savings that can be quantified and reinvested into improving the business as it goes along. And when I say business, I'm even talking about the business of government, because that's one of the things that we like to measure. You know, if I could say, all right, instead of a citizen taking 5 hours to complete a transaction, he can now do it in 1 hour. Then we know that that 4 hours is efficiency, not just for the citizen, but for the public servant who's delivering the service, and can now say, okay, I now have 4 hours to devote to something else, so I can add more value in this space.
All right. Thanks so much for that further comment. It really touches also on another thing I had noted here, which was the question of multi-stakeholder participation. I think the example you gave there of the Developers Hub is very opportune in that sense, because you're looking at involvement of others, not just civil servants, but others to benefit or to take advantage of their skill set into what will be these solutions. And as you put it, not just business in general, but the business of government. And I think that dovetails well with Dr. Charles's presentation on coming up with this more innovative and multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach with the new BSc that had been launched at the Five Island campus. We have a few questions coming in, so I'm going to raise the first one. I believe this is for you, Denise, from an anonymous attendee. What international indicators for the measurement of digital transformation is recommended for the regional context that will provide a viable benchmark, but also not disregard the local or regional context of digital impact? So international indicators to help with benchmarking, but not disregard the particularities of our environments.
Well, one of the indices that is popularly used, and I'm referring here to the ITU and their ICT Development Index. The ITU has actually pulled the ongoing use of that index because they realize that the landscape has evolved in such a way. The measures that had been used up to, I think the last one they did was 2017, are no longer applicable in the environment. So, when we think about impact, a lot of the measures are looking at impact, and they measure things like trust and confidence. Are people trusting the system? Are they confident that things, and Ophelia would have spoken to data protection. Are they confident that when they transact in the virtual environment, that their information remains safe and private to them and used for only the purposes for which it was intended? So we look at things like trust and confidence. We look at things like digital literacy, digital readiness. We look, of course, at things like innovation, and how do we measure innovation in its realest sense? So it's not, it is looking at those kinds of global indicators, but also looking at the regional aspect of things, like our talent pool in the region. Should we be going after the very sophisticated set of tech skills, or is that something we should outsource? I mean, these are conversations that need to be had in terms of growing the local industry, the rate at which we grow the local industry, and the focus on which we design and implement DT initiatives. So yes, we do look at the international side of it, but we also try to make it relevant to what we do regionally.
Thank you very much, Denise. And I think that's a very timely discussion. The indicators of the past may not necessarily reflect our realities, but the idea that we should be looking at things from a regional lens, that whole question of the regional skill sets, I find that very important. We are speaking about a Caribbean single ICT space. That's not a concept that would ever be lost on anyone. It's very crucial for us. And being able to understand how we pull together ideas, resources, skills, capital is something that's very crucial for us to really realize those aims. I'm going to move to another question here. This question comes from Deirdre Williams from Civic. How great is the danger that those without digital access will fall so far through the net that they vanish into a separate society? And she said that with reference to Denise's comments, but this question is put to all of the speakers. So how great is the danger of people being totally excluded and falling into what will be a completely different segment of society? So Denise, while you have the floor, and then I'd love to hear of you.
I mean, we have seen it in Trinidad, and I'm using anecdotal information here. When we had, in the height of the pandemic, when we had children who had to have access to devices and access to connectivity to engage in online schooling, the figures were astounding, in terms of how many people did not actually have access. Recently, our regulator completed a digital inclusion survey that looked at broadband to the home. It looked at where people get access, but I don't know that it tells the entire story of the people that fall through the cracks and why they fall through the cracks. I mean, one of the measures, and this was an alarming one, was that of the people who said that they did not have internet access at home, a large portion of them said they didn't need it, right? So it begs the question, if I don't know I need it, then why would I want it? So how do we motivate? How do we bring the message across that, connectivity, and not just connectivity to be able to call your family in another part of the country, but connectivity to the world to see what is going on out there is as important as having a connection to get electricity, as important as having a connection to get water. I mean, I'm not discounting hygiene factors here. So maybe if somebody doesn't have money to get food to eat, internet is not solving their problems. But we need to be pervasive in how technology is applied across the board. And I want to see that number in terms of people who think they don't need the internet go down to zero, and that I think will have served my purpose in this public policy space in government and the work we have to do in terms of making digital transformation real.
Right, that's a very, very key point there. And I think Ophelia's initiative actually helped coerce people into understanding digital, because on the one hand, it brings all of these efficiencies to government, but on the other hand, it exposes a lot of people into what would be a digital experience. I would reasonably understand that travelers would be still a segment of society, but nonetheless, it does encourage some sort of digital inclusion. So the same question to you, Ophelia. In terms of a danger of a digital fallout, what do you see from where you sit?
I think that's a great question. And I would look at it broadly. I know overall, when we look at the big tech companies, there's certainly a great drive to look at access and inclusion. When we come to the smaller islands, for example, like St. Kitts and Nevis, because we are geographically, we are very small. And so when it comes to adapting to technology and new things, we are also early adapters. And what I find is that, again, with COVID, it's just fast track everything. And so we've had the telecoms come on board where they're being innovative in their offerings to get more people connected. We are able to see where persons would have lost their jobs during COVID and now remote workers. And so we have lost opportunity on one hand, and we have opportunities where persons are remote workers. So they definitely need to have access. So the telecoms have come on board and actually create programs whereby they can offer fiber to the home. That's going on right now. Hotspots in communities. So what we find is that there needs to be greater collaboration with the telecoms in the different countries. And I know the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, would certainly be a great driver in terms of that. There will always be those persons who just does not want to be connected to the internet. But once they see the opportunities, how could they benefit from being connected, whether in terms of job opportunities, learning opportunities? I think it's just a matter of time when they're going to come on board as well, and ensuring that the connectivity, the cost of access is lowered and the quality is good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ophelia. And Dr. Charles, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, all right. I guess in the interest of time, I will just add on another point. I'm going to address Nigel's comment. I know you were answering in the chat, but I think for the benefit of everyone who's following us, including on YouTube and other channels, to what extent are there linkages between industry and the programs at the Five Island campus to encourage innovation relevant to local and regional challenges? I think the background for that would be the idea, and as you have mentioned, traditionally we would have looked at what you have called very traditional training, very traditional programs, and the idea of the more interdisciplinary, in touch with industry and looking towards the future of work is something that your program is bringing forward. I know there's an exchange with Mr. Stephen Abiraj about UE St. Augustine's computer science program. Could you tell us more about that positioning of the program with industry?
Yeah, and great question. So we've had this discussion with colleagues from UE St. Augustine before. We're not trying to say St. Augustine could be first or second. What we are focused on is on the future of work. And as specifically for your question, when we look at where the jobs are going, what are the challenges within our region, data science is essential. Students need to know how to tie that with economics. And students need to know how to use the algorithms with computer science. And then students need to be able to know how to projectize that or productize it. So for us, every new academic program on our campus is informed by industry. We would have not get this program. We would have not gotten this program approved had we not shown that there was a need for industry. So we are very, very focused on making sure that, and not only industry, government as well, because as we're talking a lot about digital transformation, but Lord, if we all digitally transform and leave the governments behind, we would be like a donkey snail. The reality is that the governments within our region has to basically get on a bandwagon. And one of the things that we're trying to do is that this program is specifically designed to develop the workforce of the future for the platform economy. Right? And when you look at the platform economy, you're looking at Alibaba, you're looking at Airbnb, you're looking at Amazon. There's nothing like that in the Caribbean. So what we did is that we looked at not only talking to industry, but in talking to governments and what are the needs in terms of transforming the economic infrastructure digitally. And that is where this program came in and met that need. And I have to say that there's a comment about Harvard. I didn't say that we were fashioning after Harvard. Quite to the contrary. My analogy is that I am motivated by the fact that 225 years after Harvard was founded, MIT was founded, and as a technology and science institution, they have consistently stayed on innovation and consistently innovated. And as a matter of fact, when we wanted to start this program, that's where I went. I went back to my alma mater. The only other place a similar program like this exists is at MIT, the only place. And we fought very hard to keep the same name, which is BS in economics, data science, and computer science. And that was fought against. And so we ended up saying, innovation management is probably more appropriate locally, because we want our students to be able to create ideas, to innovate ideas, to be entrepreneurs. So that is much more, in answer to your question, that is much more in line in partnering with external institutions with local industries and creolizing those solutions for our problems and challenges.
All right, thank you so much for that. And I want to go back to a point that Bevel was making beforehand when he spoke about youth involvement, youth inclusion. On the one hand, there is the question of bringing their voices to the fore in terms of what solutions or what trends they see to speak to some of the digital transformation challenges that we are facing. But on the other hand, in addition to that sensitization or general sensitization that is required, programs such as this program at the UE Five Island campus and others, the developers hub that Denise spoke about, I'm seeing as well an issue that we probably don't speak enough about: mentorship, mentoring. Could you give us any insights as to how mentoring could add or enrich that entire concept of having more youth involvement and youth inclusion, in addition to we were structured as programs and the like, because there are a lot of how-tos that younger people are missing that others, seasoned professionals, would have had, and that's not really shared or documented anywhere else.
But that's a great question, and I want to take a sub of that question, a woman mentoring. So we had a situation where last semester where several female students. This is the only school, the School of Science, Computer, and Artificial Intelligence is the only school on campus that has less percentage female than male. All the other schools are about 85%. This is about 35% female and 65% male. And we need to switch that. We need to get our male on campuses. But we realized that one of the common complaints about the women is that there was a lack of alliance among them. So one of the universities that we have an alliance with in the US is University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And they have a very well-funded National Science Foundation Center for Women in Technology. So what we launched about a month ago is our Club for Women in Technology. And all the women in technology on this call, if you are interested in helping our youth in the region, please drop me an email. But we got a group of women who are in the industry so that our female students could see the art of the possible. And I specifically wanted to do that and launch it the week before final exams, because there was a sense in my mind that the female students had this depressed notion, because the guys, they will snuff it in your face, right? I mean, the guys will tell you, they're custom coding and they will tell you, what to do. So it was really at an opportune time, and we had like 10 female execs in the tech world from across the US and throughout the Caribbean, and it was a great inertia for our female students. So I want to put it aside and say, yes, that is something we want to do for our female students, and we need our female students to grow. In terms of the male students, and let's put the cap on all the students. The thing about our students that I am fearful for is not what they could do. The thing that I'm fearful for is that they don't see you, and they don't see everybody else on this call. They either see us from a lecturer's perspective, but they don't see the entrepreneurs coming into the school, showing them how it's done. They don't see success. They don't see success unless it's outside of the Caribbean. I think what is going to set our young people on fire is if they see that. And I'll give you one short example. In Silicon Valley, if you fail, you get more money, right? You get more money, right? Because the next investor doesn't really want you to make the same mistake. Listen, think about when you were growing up in the Caribbean. If you fail and you do something wrong, your grandmother, you're probably going to get a shoe behind your head, right? So we are in the business of reimagining and reinventing how our young people think so that they could understand that it's okay to fail fast and move on. But failure is not a concept that these young people are accustomed to, but it is essential to be a successful entrepreneur. And that's what we're trying to do on Five Island campus. Whether you're in the School of Science, Computer, and Artificial Intelligence, business, education, or nursing, we want you to think like an entrepreneur and understand that failure is essential.
Thanks so much for that. I really identify with that idea in the Caribbean. We see failure as the be all and end all, but failure is just realizing a particular path that wouldn't work for what you need to do to continue finding paths that work. In the interest of time, I'd like to just have, again, a closing remark from Ophelia and Denise. One on the same issue of mentorship and what role that plays within our societies, and just a general comment on digital transformation. So I'm really sad to do this, but I'll ask if you can just make, within 1 minute, a sort of closing remark. Ophelia and then Denise. Ophelia.
Mentorship is absolutely critical. I would have had the opportunity to go into schools and speak with persons, both male and female. And I think one of the questions I actually got as a female developer is, how much money do you make? And they're serious about that. If you cannot tell them exactly how can their learning be linked to their earning, then there are issues, and it's important to provide that mentorship continuously throughout the process. As it relates to digital transformation, I would say that we are on a good path, and then we need to continue to press forward to ensure that we have good governance, legislative agenda is intact, and our security is absolutely spot on, as well as our public awareness and education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Denise?
Mentorship is critical, especially from where I sit, and having demystifying, the idea of digital transformation, because some people think it's a pure technology domain, and it isn't that. So having people understand what we do in our role in public policy, in digital transformation and government is important, and building that capacity for succession planning in the future. And I think that is what I would like to close with in terms of digital transformation. It's an ongoing thing, and we have to appreciate the evolution. We also have to understand, what are the elements that need to be measured. It's always about making it meaningful, right? So it's about the people, not just the technology.
Thank you so much, Denise, and thank you to Ophelia and Dr. Charles as well. Digital transformation is an ongoing thing. It's what we call a wicked problem, which has a no-stopping rule. The fact of the matter is that we have to work with it. We should use the measurements that we have before us to make better decisions and to really gain efficiencies on the one hand for government and improve our effectiveness with the solutions that we come up with. And of course, none of this would be possible without taking a multi-stakeholder approach to the issue. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers this morning for your wonderful contributions. Again, folks, these are the people who are in the trenches of various digital transformation initiatives, capacity building, revolutionizing border control, and of course, looking at measurements of digital transformation on a whole. So thanks once again, and I'd like now to hand over to our next moderator for the second round table discussion, Secretary General Rodney Taylor.